There is a kind of control that doesn't look like control. It's not loud. It's not forceful. It doesn't interrupt or dominate. In fact, you might not even notice it. INFJs don't control conversations the way most people think. They don't talk the most. They don't demand attention. They don't try to win. And yet, somehow, they shape the entire conversation. Gently, quietly, almost invisibly. They guide where it goes. They influence what is said. They decide what is revealed and what is not. All without pressure. All without force. So how do they do it? How can someone stay quiet and still have control? In this video, we explore 12 subtle ways INFJs influence conversations without anyone realizing it. And by the end, you may start noticing this in real life. Let's begin. 1. They control the pace of the conversation. INFJs rarely rush. They don't feel pressure to respond instantly. They don't compete with speed. They move differently. They slow things down. Not obviously, not in a way that stands out, but subtly, almost unnoticeable. They pause before responding, not to create tension, but to think clearly, to choose words carefully. They think before speaking. They allow their thoughts to settle. They let meaning form fully. Before expressing it, they allow silence to exist, without trying to fill it, without discomfort, without urgency. And this changes everything. Because most people follow pace. Even without realizing it, conversations have rhythm. And INFJs shape that rhythm. When someone speaks slowly, others slow down. When someone pauses, others begin to reflect. They begin to think more. They begin to feel more. They begin to respond, instead of react. INFJs create space. A quiet space. A thoughtful space. And in that space, the conversation deepens, naturally, without force, without control that feels controlling, without them needing to push anything forward. They simply set the tone, and the conversation follows. 2. They choose what to reveal, and what to hold back. INFJs don't share everything. Not immediately, not impulsively, not without thought. They filter carefully, not to manipulate, not to control others, but to protect meaning, to protect depth, to protect their inner world. They reveal just enough. Enough to connect. Enough to engage. Enough to keep the conversation real. But not everything at once. Not all layers. Not all thoughts. Not all feelings. They unfold slowly, piece by piece. And this creates curiosity. A natural curiosity. Not forced. Not intentional. People begin to wonder, to lean in, to stay engaged. It keeps the conversation balanced, not one-sided, not overwhelming, and it gives them quiet control, because they decide the pace of openness. They decide how much depth is shared, moment by moment, because what is not said carries weight, carries presence, carries meaning. It leaves space, and that space invites attention, because what is not said is just as powerful as what is said. 3. They ask the right questions. INFJs guide conversations through questions. Not random ones. Not surface-level ones. Not questions just to keep talking. Intentional ones. Carefully chosen. Thoughtfully placed. Simple on the surface, but deep underneath. Questions that seem light, but open something deeper. They don't dominate with opinions. They don't push their views aggressively. They don't try to lead by speaking more. They invite with curiosity, genuine curiosity, calm curiosity, and questions shape direction more than statements do. They shift focus gently, without resistance. They open new paths, new ideas, new perspectives. They guide where attention goes, without forcing it. So instead of controlling directly, they guide gently, almost invisibly, through what they choose to ask, and what they choose not to ask. 4. They listen more than they speak. Listening is their advantage. A quiet advantage, often overlooked. While others talk, INFJs observe, fully, without distraction, without preparing their next response. They gather information, not just words, but meaning. They understand patterns. Across time. Across behavior. Across emotion. They notice tone. Subtle changes. Hidden tension. Unspoken feeling. Emotion. Present, even when not expressed. Inconsistency. Small gaps. Small contradictions. Things that don't fully align. And with that understanding, they respond with precision. Not quickly. Not impulsively. But accurately. Not noise. Not reaction. But clarity. Focused. Intentional. And this gives them influence. Because they speak less. But say more. Every word carries weight. Every response feels considered. And people notice that, even if they can't explain why. 5. They mirror energy. INFJs adjust to the energy in the room. Naturally. Without effort. Without planning. They sense emotional tone. And respond accordingly. Calm with calm. Soft with soft. Grounded with chaos. They don't overpower. They don't dominate the emotional space. They don't impose their presence. They align. Subtly. Gently. And this creates comfort. A sense of ease. A sense of being understood. People feel understood. Seen. Accepted. Without needing to explain themselves fully. And when someone feels that, they open up. More than expected. More than planned. More than they usually would. Which gives INFJs deeper insight. Into thoughts. Into feelings. Into patterns. Without asking directly. Without pushing. Just by being present, in the right way. 6. They use silence as a tool. Silence is not empty for INFJs. It is active. Alive. Full of meaning. Intentional. Even when it appears effortless. They pause. Not to create discomfort, but to allow space. They let moments breathe. They don't rush transitions. They don't interrupt the natural flow. And in that silence, people respond. Naturally. Without being asked. People fill the space. They talk more. They reveal more. They explain more. They go deeper, without realizing it. Because silence invites expression. It removes pressure. It removes interruption. It creates openness. INFJs don't need to push. They don't need to pull information out. Silence does the work. Quietly. Naturally. And they remain in control. Without saying a word. Without directing attention. Without appearing to lead. Just by allowing space to exist. 7. They stay emotionally balanced. INFJs don't react quickly. They don't jump into emotion. They don't let the moment pull them instantly. They pause. They breathe. They observe what is happening. They stay centered. Even when emotions rise. Even when the room feels tense. Even when others become reactive. They hold their ground internally. Quietly. Without effort showing on the surface. And this stability influences the entire conversation. More than words do. More than arguments do. Because emotional energy spreads. It moves between people. It shapes the tone. It shapes the direction. When one person stays calm, others begin to settle. Slowly. Naturally. Without being told to. The tone shifts. From sharp to softer. From reactive to reflective. The intensity lowers. The pressure fades. And space returns. And INFJs guide that shift. Just by how they respond. Just by what they don't react to. Just by staying steady. Their calm becomes the anchor. And the conversation follows. 8. They read the direction of the conversation. INFJs can sense where things are going. Before they get there. Before it becomes obvious. Before others notice. They notice patterns. Not just in words. But in tone. In pacing. In emotional flow. They see emotional buildup. Small at first. Then growing. They feel tension early. Before it becomes conflict. Before it becomes visible. So they adjust. Quietly. Without announcing it. They redirect gently. Not forcefully. Not abruptly. Through a question. A simple shift in focus. Through a pause. That interrupts momentum. Through a subtle change in tone. Softer. Slower. More grounded. And the conversation shifts. Gradually. Naturally. Without resistance. without anyone noticing, without anyone realizing it was guided. 9. They validate without agreeing. INFJs know how to acknowledge feelings without losing their own position. They don't dismiss emotion. They don't ignore perspective. They recognize it. They give it space. They say things like, I understand what you mean. I see why that matters. I can hear what you're saying. Simple words, but meaningful. This creates safety, a feeling of being heard, a feeling of being respected. But it doesn't mean agreement. They don't surrender their truth. They don't abandon their perspective. They simply hold both understanding and clarity. It keeps the conversation open, without conflict, without defensiveness, without escalation. And this balance gives them quiet control. Because people relax. They stop pushing. They stop defending. And when that happens, the conversation flows more freely. 10. They focus on meaning, not noise. INFJs don't get distracted easily. They don't follow every detail. They don't react to every word. They step back mentally. They look at the whole. They ignore surface-level chaos, the interruptions, the emotional spikes, the unnecessary details. They focus on what matters, the core idea, the deeper message, the intention behind the words, what is really being said, what is really being felt. And by doing that, they guide the conversation back to meaning, gently, without correction, without force. They bring focus back to what matters, back to clarity, back to depth, without forcing it, without making it obvious, just by where they place attention. And others follow. 11. They know when to step back. Control is not always about leading, not always about guiding, not always about influencing. Sometimes, it's about stepping back, creating space, allowing others to move forward. INFJs understand this deeply. They know when to pause, when to stop speaking, when to let silence take over, when to let others speak fully, without interruption, without redirection, when to allow space for thoughts to form, for emotions to settle, for expression to happen naturally. And this creates trust, a quiet trust, because people don't feel controlled, they don't feel guided, they don't feel influenced. They feel heard, respected, allowed to exist as they are. And in that trust, INFJs gain influence, naturally, without effort, without force, because true influence comes from space, not pressure. 12. They end conversations with intention. INFJs don't just drift away. They close conversations thoughtfully. They summarize. They reflect. They bring clarity. And this leaves an impression, a sense of meaning, a sense of completion. And even at the end, they guide how the conversation is remembered. INFJs don't control conversations in obvious ways. They don't dominate. They don't overpower. They don't demand. Their control is quieter, softer, but deeply effective. They guide. They shape. They influence. Through presence. Through awareness. Through intention. And most people never notice it, but they feel it. And that is what makes it powerful. If this resonated with you, you may understand INFJs more deeply now. Or maybe, you are one. Stay calm. Stay aware. Stay intentional. Because in a world full of noise, your quiet influence is a rare kind of control.